CEO Millionaire's daughter refused to speak at school. The silence was deafening. In a classroom filled with 32 students, only one sound could be heard: the nervous tapping of Mrs. Sarah Chen's pen against her desk. For 3 months, she had tried everything to reach Sophia Montgomery, the 15-year-old daughter of tech billionaire James Montgomery. While other students chatted and laughed, Sophia sat in the back corner, her designer clothes creating an invisible barrier between her and the world. She hadn't spoken a single word since transferring to Lincoln High School, and her piercing blue eyes held secrets that seemed too heavy for someone so young. What Mrs. Chen didn't know was that this silent girl would soon teach her the most important lesson of her 20-year teaching career, and in return, she would give Sophia something more valuable than all her father's money combined. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a comment below about a teacher who changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more inspiring stories like this one. Mrs. Sarah Chen had always believed that every student could be reached. It was this unwavering faith that had sustained her through 2 decades of teaching in underfunded public schools, countless budget cuts, and the mounting pressure to improve test scores. At 43, she was tired but not defeated, struggling to make ends meet on her teacher's salary while raising her own teenage son as a single mother. When the principal informed her that Sophia Montgomery would be joining her advanced English class, Sarah felt a familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with determination. Sophia's arrival at Lincoln High had caused quite a stir. The daughter of James Montgomery, whose tech empire was worth over $3 billion, suddenly appeared at their modest public school without explanation. Rumors flew through the hallways like wildfire. Some said she'd been expelled from her elite private academy for fighting. Others whispered about scandals and family drama. But Mrs. Chen had learned long ago not to trust hallway gossip. On Sophia's first day, she walked into the classroom wearing a perfectly pressed uniform that probably cost more than Mrs. Chen's monthly salary. Her long blonde hair was pulled back in a precise bun, and she carried herself with the poise of someone trained in etiquette from birth. But it was her eyes that caught Mrs. Chen's attention. They were the eyes of someone much older, filled with a sadness that seemed to weigh down her small frame. "Class, we have a new student joining us today," Mrs. Chen announced with her warmest smile. "Sophia, would you like to introduce yourself?" Sophia's response was silence. Not the shy, nervous silence of a typical new student, but something deeper, more deliberate. She simply shook her head once and took the empty seat in the back corner, as far from everyone else as possible. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Mrs. Chen tried every technique in her arsenal. She assigned group projects, hoping peer interaction might draw Sophia out. She offered extra credit for class participation. She even tried calling on Sophia directly, but the girl would simply stare back with those haunting blue eyes, neither defiant nor apologetic, just empty. The other students had initially tried to befriend her. After all, she was rich and famous by association, but Sophia's complete lack of response eventually discouraged even the most persistent attempts at friendship. Soon she became like a ghost in the classroom, present but not really there. Mrs. Chen's colleagues began to whisper their own theories. "Maybe she thinks she's too good for us," suggested Mr. Peterson from the math department. Rich kids like that often do. But Mrs. Chen couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Sophia's silence than simple arrogance. The first real clue came during a lesson on Maya Angelou's "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings," as Mrs. Chen read aloud a passage about trauma and finding one's voice. She noticed Sophia's carefully composed mask slip for just a moment. A single tear rolled down the girl's cheek before she quickly wiped it away and rebuilt her wall of silence. That night, Mrs. Chen found herself researching the Montgomery family online. What she discovered broke her heart. 6 months earlier, Sophia's mother, Elizabeth Montgomery, had died in a car accident while driving to pick up Sophia from a school event. The accident had made national news, not just because of James Montgomery's wealth, but because of the tragic circumstances. Elizabeth had been rushing through a thunderstorm because Sophia had called, scared and wanting to come home early from a sleepover. Mrs. Chen sat in her small apartment, staring at her computer screen as the pieces fell into place. Sophia wasn't being difficult or entitled. She was drowning in guilt and grief, convinced that her phone call had caused her mother's death. The silence wasn't defiance, it was punishment. She had stopped speaking because she believed her words had killed the person she loved most. The next challenge came when the principal, Dr. Williams, called Mrs. Chen into his office. "Sarah, we need to talk about the Montgomery situation," he said, his expression grim. "I've been getting pressure from the school board. Some parents are complaining that having a non-participating student in advanced classes is disrupting the learning environment. They want her moved to a study hall or independent study program." Mrs. Chen felt her heart sink. "Sir, I believe I can reach her. I just need more time." "Time is something we don't have," Dr. Williams replied. "Her father has been completely unresponsive to our attempts to schedule meetings. The girl hasn't turned in a single assignment. Technically, she's failing every class. If something doesn't change by the end of the month, we'll have to move her." That evening, Mrs. Chen made a decision that would change both their lives. Instead of going home to grade papers, she drove to the Montgomery estate. The house was a sprawling modern mansion that seemed to stretch forever, surrounded by perfectly manicured grounds and an intimidating security gate. When she pressed the intercom button, a crisp voice answered, "Montgomery residence." "Hello, this is Mrs. Chen, Sophia's English teacher. I'd like to speak with Mr. Montgomery about his daughter." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Montgomery is not available. Please contact the school administration for any academic matters." But Mrs. Chen was persistent. "Please tell him that I'm here because I understand what Sophia is going through. I lost my husband in a car accident when my son was about her age. I know what guilt and grief can do to a family. I'm not leaving until I can help." Another long pause, then the gate slowly opened. James Montgomery was not what Mrs. Chen had expected. Instead of the polished, confident businessman she'd seen in magazine photos, the man who answered the door looked exhausted and defeated. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and his eyes held the same haunted look she'd seen in his daughter. "Mr. Montgomery, thank you for seeing me," Mrs. Chen began gently. "I wanted to talk to you about Sophia." "There's nothing to discuss," he said quietly. "She doesn't speak. She barely eats. She spends all her time in her room. I've hired therapists, psychiatrists, specialists from all over the country. Nothing works. She blames herself for her mother's death, and nothing I say can convince her otherwise." "What about you?" Mrs. Chen asked softly. "Do you blame yourself too?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked. "Every day," he whispered, "I should have picked her up myself. I should have insisted Elizabeth wait for the storm to pass. I should have protected them both." Mrs. Chen nodded with understanding. "Grief is a family disease, Mr. Montgomery. When one person carries guilt, it spreads to everyone who loves them, but healing is also contagious. If we can help Sophia find her voice again, it might help you find yours too." Over the next hour, Mrs. Chen shared her own story. How her husband David had died when their son Marcus was 14. How Marcus had blamed himself for asking his father to drive to the store in a blizzard. How they had both nearly drowned in silence and guilt before finding their way back to each other. The key wasn't forcing Marcus to talk, she explained. It was showing him that his words mattered, that his voice had value beyond that one terrible phone call. Sophia needs to remember that her words can heal, not just hurt. James Montgomery listened with the desperate attention of a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. When Mrs. Chen finished, he asked, "What do you need from me?" The plan Mrs. Chen proposed was unconventional and risky. Instead of traditional therapy sessions or academic interventions, she wanted to create a special project just for Sophia. She would come to the Montgomery house 3 evenings a week, not as a teacher demanding participation, but as a friend offering an opportunity. "I want to teach her about the power of words," Mrs. Chen explained, "not through essays or book reports, but through real connection. I want to share stories with her, stories of people who found healing through expression, who discovered that their voices could create beauty even after experiencing tremendous pain." The first evening, Mrs. Chen arrived with a simple notebook and a thermos of hot chocolate. She found Sophia in the mansion's library, a breathtakingly beautiful room filled with thousands of books that looked like they'd never been touched. Sophia was curled up in a window seat, staring out at the garden where her mother's rose bushes were slowly dying from neglect. "Hello, Sophia," Mrs. Chen said softly, settling into a nearby chair. "I brought hot chocolate. It was my son's favorite when he was going through a difficult time." Sophia didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. Mrs. Chen opened her notebook. "I thought I'd tell you about a student I had several years ago. Her name was Maria, and like you, she'd stopped speaking. Her story was different from yours, but her pain was just as real." For the next hour, Mrs. Chen shared Maria's story, how the girl had witnessed something traumatic, how she'd retreated into silence, and how she'd eventually found her way back to words through poetry. She didn't ask Sophia to respond or participate. She simply offered her story like a gift, with no strings attached. When she finished, she placed the notebook on the table between them. "I'll leave this here," she said. "Sometimes it's easier to write words before we can speak them. If you ever want to share anything, a thought, a memory, even just a single word, you can write it down. I'll read it, but only if you want me to." The second week, Mrs. Chen found a single sentence written in Sophia's careful handwriting. "I miss my mum's laugh." Mrs. Chen's heart soared, but she kept her response gentle. She wrote back below Sophia's sentence, "Tell me about her laugh." What made it special? By the third week, the notebook contained an entire conversation conducted in written words. Sophia had begun to share memories of her mother, how Elizabeth would sing off-key in the car, how she made elaborate pancakes on Sunday mornings, shaped like animals, how she would stay up all night helping Sophia with school projects. But it was during the fourth week that the real breakthrough happened. Mrs. Chen arrived to find Sophia holding the notebook, tears streaming down her face. "She was supposed to stay home that night," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible after months of silence. "But I called her crying because the other girls were being mean, and I wanted to come home. If I had just been stronger, if I hadn't called..." Mrs. Chen moved closer, her own eyes filling with tears. "Sophia, honey, calling your mom when you were scared wasn't wrong. It's what children do. They reach out to the people who love them. Your mother came to get you because she loved you, not because you forced her to. But if you hadn't called, she would have come anyway," Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. "Because that's what mothers do. They show up. They protect. They love unconditionally. Your phone call didn't cause the accident, sweetheart. The storm did. A moment of bad timing did. But your mother's love for you? That was pure and beautiful, and nothing to feel guilty about." For the first time in months, Sophia really cried. Not the silent tears she'd shed in class, but the deep, healing sobs of someone finally releasing months of buried pain. The next Monday at school, something miraculous happened. When Mrs. Chen asked the class to share their thoughts on the weekend reading assignment, a quiet voice from the back corner said, "I'd like to share something I wrote." The entire classroom fell silent as Sophia stood up, walked to the front, and began to read from her notebook. Her voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "I used to think words were dangerous," she read. "I thought they had the power to hurt and destroy. And maybe they do. But I've learned they also have the power to heal, to connect, to honor the people we love. This is for my mom, who taught me that love is worth the risk of loss, and that silence is never the answer to pain." What followed was a beautiful tribute to her mother, not dwelling on the tragedy, but celebrating the joy Elizabeth Montgomery had brought to the world. When Sophia finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the classroom, but the transformation didn't end there. Sophia began participating in class discussions, her insights proving to be remarkably mature and thoughtful. She started joining group projects, and her natural leadership abilities began to emerge. She even began eating lunch with other students, slowly building the friendships she'd rejected for so long. The change in the Montgomery household was equally dramatic. Sophia's return to communication opened the floodgates for her father as well. James Montgomery began attending school events, participating in parent-teacher conferences, and most importantly, he started talking to his daughter about their shared grief. 3 months later, Mrs. Chen received a letter that made her career feel worthwhile. It was from James Montgomery, but it had been written in Sophia's careful handwriting. "Dear Mrs. Chen, my dad asked me to write this letter because he says you saved our family, but I think we saved each other. You taught me that words aren't weapons, they're bridges. They connect us to the people we love, both the ones who are here and the ones who are gone. You showed me that my mother's death wasn't caused by my words, but that her love lives on because of them. Every time I speak now, I honor her memory. Every time I connect with another person, I'm using the love she gave me to make the world a little brighter. Thank you for not giving up on me when I had given up on myself. Thank you for showing me that silence isn't strength. Finding your voice again after it's been broken, that's where real courage lives. Love, Sophia, and Dad. P.S. Dad says to tell you that he's established the Elizabeth Montgomery Foundation for grieving students, and we'd like you to help us run it. Also, he's personally funding a raise for every teacher in your school, because he finally understands that teachers like you are priceless. At the end of year school assembly, Sophia Montgomery took the stage to deliver the student keynote address. As Mrs. Chen watched from the audience, her heart swelling with pride, Sophia spoke about the power of second chances, the importance of patient teachers, and the way love can heal even the deepest wounds. 6 months ago, I believed that my voice had caused nothing but pain, Sophia told the packed auditorium. But I learned that silence isn't the answer to guilt or grief. The answer is finding people who will listen, who will wait, and who will love you back to wholeness. Mrs. Chen didn't just teach me about literature, she taught me about life. She showed me that every ending can become a new beginning, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply show up for each other. The story of Sophia Montgomery and Mrs. Sarah Chen became legendary at Lincoln High School. It was a reminder that every student has a story, every silence has a reason, and every person, no matter how wealthy or how broken, sometimes just needs someone who refuses to give up on them. Mrs. Chen continued teaching for many more years, but she often said that Sophia had taught her just as much as she had taught her student. She learned that patience is a form of love, that healing happens in its own time, and that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Years later, when Sophia graduated as valedictorian from Harvard and went on to become a renowned advocate for mental health in schools, she never forgot the teacher who saw past her silence to the person she could become. And Mrs. Chen never forgot that sometimes the students who challenge us the most are the ones who change us forever. Their story reminds us that in a world full of noise, sometimes the most important thing we can offer another person is our quiet, patient presence. Sometimes love looks like refusing to give up, when giving up would be easier. And sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we almost didn't say. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of not giving up on people. And tell us in the comments about a teacher, mentor, or person who refused to give up on you. Their stories deserve to be celebrated too. Don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more inspiring stories that remind us of the incredible power we all have to change lives, sometimes with nothing more than patience, kindness, and the courage to keep showing up. Remember, every act of love creates ripples we may never see, but that doesn't make them any less real or any less important.